Well, it's been revealed that the scientists whose alarmist data prompted the first COVID lockdown admitted it would cause economic misery. Giving evidence at the COVID inquiry, Professor Neil Ferguson also claimed he'd warned it would hit the poorest hardest. Ferguson's study predicted a worst-case scenario where 500,000 people in the UK would die without intervention. And the report, published a week before Johnson announced lockdown, called for social and economic restrictions, despite it later being revealed that Ferguson himself had flouted rules to visit his lover. Well, you're probably not surprised this enrages me. You know, now that we've got the COVID inquiry, it has been a ridiculously long time coming. Bits of information are coming out, some of which tell us a little bit, not a great deal, frankly, that we didn't know. I mean, obviously, locking down a nation in the way that we did was going to be catastrophic. And I still think that most people could probably get behind a short-term lockdown whilst the government and the healthcare experts and everybody worked out what was going on, maybe for a week or two maximum. But for Professor Ferguson now to come out and say, well, I warned it would be bad. I mean, he was single-handedly responsible for massively ratcheting up the pressure on politicians by giving them a succession of ludicrous doomsday scenario projections, which turned out to bear very little relation to what happened.
But Isabel, isn't the story that's come out today is actually that he did, that in some ways he's been slightly maligned because he did say that the economy and the other elements would be damaged, and the politicians and so on chose to ignore his warnings about that. That was how I read it. So in fact, yes, he had given this doomsday worst case scenario, but he had also said, bear in mind, there will be a very bad impact from lockdown, and they said, well, we will worry about that later.
But he also said it is without doubt there is no clear strategy. The modelling was completely out of kilter.
Yeah.
It was way out.
Yeah. Modelling
it was all about
works.
fear, but also the politicians panicked. They had no idea what they were doing. I agree. I actually think people could cope with the first bit of lockdown whilst they assess the situation, work out the virulence of the virus and so on. But actually, they knew it was catastrophic to businesses, to schools, to children, to the intellectual development of those children, social skills of those children. What they did, I think, is absolutely abhorrent.
By the way, you know who rendered the COVID inquiry pointless, don't you?
Me, yeah. I
With
mean,
the
look,
WhatsApp files.
without being at all self-aggrandising.
I'm praising you. Don't get me wrong.
Actually, what we learned from the WhatsApps that were published in the lockdown files was a lot more revelatory than the sum total of what we've learned so far from the COVID inquiry. I mean, there was a couple of fantastic WhatsApps released in the COVID inquiry in the last few days, which I didn't actually have, but they don't tell us anything that the ones that I did have showed us, which is that Downing Street was utterly dysfunctional, that the Cabinet Secretary despaired of what was going on, and that the people who were making the decisions were the wrong people.
Do you know what really annoyed me about this guy? And his stupid little models that were hideously wrong.
Yeah.
That our stupid politicians treated like, he who must be obeyed. Then he was exposed for being a two-bit little idiot, really, hypocrite, going around to see his girlfriend, who was married to someone else, by the way, so it gets worse, in the middle of lockdowns. And still, throughout this, even after that, even after it was proved that the lockdowns hadn't really worked, the BBC venerated this man. He kept going on to the radio.
And by the way,
why? Why did they venerate him? He was wrong, and he caused so much trouble.
And also, if he was so concerned about the socio-economic impact, and he also ought to have been very concerned about the other healthcare collateral on it, then why has it taken him so many years to come out and say so? I mean, if that warning was a heartfelt one made in March 2020, then why wasn't he shouting from the rafters about it in the summer and in the autumn and so on and so forth?
Do you know what we should do? Ban epidemiology as a science. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Based on stupid little models. It's never right.
Or maybe better modelling.
But modelling
is not had her say.
Thank you. Thanks, Isabel. I was actually going to agree with you in the sense that if he felt so strongly that the economic effects of lockdown would be devastating, he should have said that at the time. 3 years later, coming out in the inquiry and saying, "Well, I said it would be horrible," but at the time you stood behind it. That doesn't see. You're a massive hypocrite.
There are plenty of people.
I also think that at the time, going into lockdown, it was an unknown. Like, we really didn't know what we were dealing with. And yes, I think, like Isabel said, most people could get behind that at first. But I think as time went on, you know, it made less and less sense.
By the way, let's not call him
I think
Professor.
That's what people have
let's not call him Professor. Let's call him what the Sun brilliantly dubbed him, the bonking boffin.
Thank you.
Love it.